The first light of dawn does not rush. It arrives slowly, like a soft breath across the hills of Macedonia. A pale band of gold begins to loosen the dark from the edges of the sky. It stretches gently, hesitantly, as if the world itself were unsure whether to rise. If you were Alexander, you would feel the weight of that light before it even touched your skin. The air is still cool, damp with night's residue. The camp is hushed, not yet awake, though you can hear a faint stirring, the creak of leather, the shuffle of feet against earth, a cough quickly stifled. It is not yet the day of battle, not yet the thunder of armies. It is simply the morning before marching. The kind of morning where silence feels like a companion, where the smallest sound, a sparrow breaking into song, a soldier tying the strap of his sandal, carries its own weight. You rise slowly, but with awareness. The body is still young, still restless, but even youth knows that days like this stretch longer than time itself. Around you, the camp lies in half sleep. Rows of tents, some patched from past campaigns, stand like silent companions. The canvas breathes faintly in the breeze, creaking on its poles. Horses shuffle in their tethers, stamping the ground, exhaling warm clouds into the cool air. Some soldiers are already awake, though they move slowly, with the careful gestures of men delaying the inevitable. One bends over his sandals, tightening the straps with deliberate slowness, as though tying them tighter might slow the march ahead. Another rubs his hands together, warming them over a small ember he coaxed from the ashes of last night's fire. The smell is familiar: leather, wool, the faint musk of men gathered in great numbers, the sweetness of hay meant for animals. And underneath, always, the smell of earth, the grounding scent of soil that does not move even as armies pass over it. If you were Alexander, you would feel a strange intimacy with this silence. You would know that once the day fully breaks, this stillness will vanish, replaced by commands, footsteps, the clatter of shields, the grunt of oxen pulling carts. But for now, in these suspended moments, you are not yet conqueror, not yet commander. You are simply one among many, breathing in the same cold air, watching the sky unfold. Your body is 20 years old, yet it carries the weight of centuries. Sons of kings do not wake like other men. From childhood, you have lived among voices that told you your life was already not your own. This morning, as you sit on the edge of your tent, watching the first line of sun crest over the hills, you can almost feel those voices. They whisper of your father, Philip, whose shadow stretches over every step you take. They remind you that the march you begin today is not entirely yours. It is an inheritance, a campaign dreamed long before you drew your first breath. But if you were Alexander, you would know that inheritance is not enough. Names may open doors, but only footsteps carry you through them. You inhale slowly. The air is sharp, almost metallic, filled with the promise of movement. You close your eyes, and for a moment, there is nothing but breath. The camp begins to wake, not with sudden noise, but with the low hum of life stirring. A soldier shakes the dew from his cloak. Another pulls a strip of bread from his pouch, chewing slowly. A pair of men laugh softly at some private joke, their voices quickly hushed so as not to disturb the fragile stillness of the morning. From the animal pens comes the low bellow of oxen, the restless whinny of horses. The sounds fold into one another, weaving a fabric of familiarity. This is not the chaos of battle, nor the spectacle of parades. It is the quiet ritual of departure, a rhythm soldiers know better than any hymn. If you were Alexander, you would feel that rhythm enter your own body. The way shoulders straighten when belts are tightened. The way hands linger on spear shafts, not yet raised, but already remembered. The way silence grows not from emptiness, but from anticipation. You watch them, your men, not nobles, not philosophers, not legends, just men. Some older, some younger, some hardened by years of marching, others new, their faces still carrying the softness of boyhood. They do not speak of destiny. They do not speak of empire. Their concerns are smaller, closer. The fit of a sandal, the weight of a shield, the thought of bread that may or may not last until evening. And yet, beneath those small concerns, there lies something greater. An unspoken bond, the knowledge that each man's step depends on another's. That conquest is not carried on the shoulders of kings alone, but on the tired feet of countless others. If you were Alexander, you would know this bond is fragile. It is forged not by speeches or promises, but by mornings like this, when men rise together under the same uncertain sky. The sun is climbing now, stretching its fingers across the camp. Shadows grow shorter. The air warms, carrying with it the faint smell of dust, already disturbed by restless feet. This is the last stillness before movement. The moment when time seems to hesitate, caught between what was and what will be. You close your eyes once more. You feel the weight of the day pressing against you, not as fear, but as inevitability. There will be speeches. There will be orders. There will be the long road east. But in this single breath, there is only you, the dawn, and the quiet promise of footsteps yet to be taken. If you were Alexander, you would carry this stillness with you. For the further you march, the louder the world becomes, and the rarer such silences are found. Thus begins the day, not with trumpet calls, not with banners unfurled, but with the simplest of human gestures, men rising from sleep, tying their sandals, breaking their bread, looking to the horizon. History remembers Alexander as conqueror, but even conquerors must rise like any other man. They must feel the chill of dawn, the stiffness of limbs, the quiet hum of a camp not yet alive. The burden of conquest does not begin with battles. It begins here, in the dawn before marching, when silence is still your closest companion. And so, the journey begins. The night is long, though the camp sleeps. Outside, the air is heavy with the muted sounds of men breathing, of horses shifting, of distant fires cracking low in their embers. Yet inside your tent, the world feels smaller, quieter, contained in shadows and the warm flicker of a single oil lamp. If you were Alexander, this is when you would sit with your maps. They are spread before you on a low wooden table, worn at the corners from much use. The parchment curls gently, as if resisting the weight of ink. There is no sound here, but the faint scratch of your fingers smoothing creases, the occasional hiss of the flame, and the distant sigh of the wind brushing against the canvas walls. This is where conquest begins, not in battlefields, but in silence, in lines traced across parchment, in rivers sketched with uncertain strokes, in names written in scripts you cannot always read. Maps are fragile things. They seem solid when spread before you, but you know the truth. Ink cannot capture the weight of mountains, or the length of rivers, or the heat of deserts. Lines drawn here may shift tomorrow, erased by the march of armies, redrawn by victories or defeats. You trace a finger along one of these lines. It bends across the parchment, marking the boundary of Persia, a boundary not yet crossed, not yet tested. To the men in your camp, this line is a distant promise, a promise of wealth, of glory, of stories to tell their grandchildren. But to you, it feels heavier. Every mark of ink carries lives with it. Each river crossed will take men. Each mountain climbed will take strength. Each border erased will take memory. If you were Alexander, you would feel the weight of maps pressing down on you, as though the parchment itself were a stone resting on your chest. You remember your father, Philip, hunched over similar maps, his hand steady, his voice low, his mind fixed on conquest. It was he who began this vision, the dream of marching east, of pressing Greece's strength against Persia's vast empire. Now, the maps are yours. But the dream feels larger than you, almost too large to carry. If you were Alexander, you would understand that inheritance is never light. To inherit a kingdom is to inherit its debts, its promises, its unfinished ambitions. And maps are the most dangerous inheritance of all, for they are filled with promises to be fulfilled. You sit back, letting the lamp's glow soften. Shadows bend across the parchment, twisting rivers and mountains into unfamiliar shapes. You blink, and for a moment, you feel the enormity of it. The endless space, the uncharted lands, the unknown waiting beyond each ink stroke. Maps may speak of places, but their truest language is silence. The blank spaces, the unmarked corners, the edges where the ink fades into nothing. These are where uncertainty lives. You stare at those spaces longer than at the borders themselves. What lies beyond? What rivers are not drawn? What mountains not marked? What cities not recorded? For others, blank space may seem like possibility. For you, it is weight. The unknown demands courage, but it also demands sacrifice. Every blank corner filled will cost lives, not in numbers, but in faces, in names, in laughter lost along the march. If you were Alexander, you would know that the silence of blank maps is the heaviest silence of all. You are not entirely alone. Outside the tent, generals sleep. Parmenion, Ptolemy, Hephaestion. They too will march these maps, though tonight they rest their bodies instead of their minds. You think of them often as you study. Parmenion, seasoned, cautious, already weary of overreach. Hephaestion, ever loyal, his faith in you like a quiet flame. Ptolemy, curious, observant, already thinking of how the world might be recorded. They are with you, though not present. Their voices echo faintly in your head as you trace another line, as you consider another crossing. Even in silence, you are not alone. If you were Alexander, you would feel the comfort and the burden of companionship. The knowledge that even your thoughts ripple outward, touching lives beyond your own. You lean back, stretching your hand toward the lamp. The flame flickers, elongating shadows. You close your eyes, picturing the distance these maps represent. From Macedonia to Persia. From familiar fields to deserts where no Greek has marched. From cities known by name to places whispered only in stories. The scale is vast. A finger's breadth on parchment becomes weeks of walking. An inch of ink becomes rivers that swallow bridges, forests that resist fire, mountains that grind men down to bone. If you were Alexander, you would feel the strangeness of this translation, how the smallest gesture of ink becomes the heaviest burden of flesh. Hours pass. Outside, the camp is quieted fully. Snores rise and fall in the dark. A horse stamps once, then settles again. The oil in your lamp burns lower. Shadows grow larger, the map darker, the lines less certain. You lean closer, eyes straining. The flame wavers, making rivers ripple, borders bend. You realize that maps are illusions. They give the appearance of control, of order, of certainty. But they are only gestures. The real world resists them. The real world bends them. And yet you cannot stop looking. Because without these lines, without this fragile parchment, you would have no guide at all. If you were Alexander, you would know that the weight of maps is not in their accuracy, but in their promise. You draw the lamp closer, letting the light touch your face. The flame crackles faintly, and in that small sound you feel something larger, as though destiny itself breathes with you in this tent. Not loud, not overwhelming, but steady. A quiet presence, invisible yet undeniable. If you were Alexander, you would know that destiny is not a roar, but a whisper. It lives in nights like this, in silence, in the fragile weight of ink, in the steady breath of men sleeping beyond the canvas walls. You lower your head, resting your hand on the edge of the map. You close your eyes. You do not sleep, not yet. But you let the silence rest against you like a cloak. And in that silence, you carry the weight of maps, heavier than swords, quieter than armies, yet inescapable all the same. Thus the night passes, not with battle, not with speeches, but with the slow turning of parchment, the quiet tracing of lines, the patient endurance of silence. History remembers Alexander as a man of action, yet behind every march, every conquest, every victory, there is this: the stillness of a tent, the glow of a lamp, the fragile weight of maps that guide a world not yet conquered. And so, when the camp wakes again at dawn, when footsteps gather and voices rise, you carry with you not just armor and command. You carry the maps, their promises, their burdens, their whispers. And that weight, quiet though it may be, never leaves you. The march is never a solitary thing. However many statues, however many books may later place you on a pedestal, the truth is simpler. If you were Alexander, you would know that conquest is carried not by a single figure, but by the thousands who walk beside you. They are your shield and your shadow, your strength and your reflection. They march the same roads, drink the same water, feel the same stones cutting into the soles of their sandals. Their names are not carved into marble, but they are carved into the very road of your life. When you step forward, so do they. When you pause, so do they. And when you dream of distance, they are the ones who make it real, step by patient step. The road east is long, and its music is not of drums or trumpets, but of smaller sounds. The steady crunch of sandals on gravel, the faint creak of leather straps, the sigh of shields shifting against shoulders, the occasional murmur of conversation, laughter drifting and fading. If you were Alexander, you would hear this music every day. It would become as familiar as your own breath. In the evenings, as camp is set, that music changes. The clatter of pots, the tearing of bread, the flicker of firelight against tired faces. Someone sings enough to remind the men that home is not entirely lost. Someone else answers with a joke. Even in fatigue, companionship softens the weight of distance. You know them by face, if not always by name. The soldier with the crooked nose broken years ago in some brawl. The young boy whose beard has not yet grown, who listens more than he speaks. The old veteran who walks more slowly, but with a steadiness that no storm can shake. These are not legends. They are flesh and bone, laughter and worry. They speak of their families, of olive trees and fishing boats, of wives who wrote letters they will not read for months. If you were Alexander, you would see in these faces a mirror of your own, not in status, not in power, but in the simple truth of being human. Even on the harshest roads, laughter finds its place. Someone trips and stumbles, and his friends tease him with gentle cruelty. Someone tells a story, exaggerated beyond recognition, and the group chuckles even if they have heard it before. The laughter is not loud, but it carries. It floats across the column, across the fires, across the darkness. It reminds the men and you that the march is not endless, that even in conquest, life continues in its simplest form, with humor, with play, with companionship. If you were Alexander, you would understand that laughter is not weakness, but strength. It is the sound of endurance made light. There are days when food runs short, when bread is stale, when water is scarce, when each sip is rationed carefully. And yet it is in these days that bonds tighten. One man tears his bread in half, offering it to another. One pours the last of his water into another's cup. If you were Alexander, you would know that this is what binds armies. Not speeches, not banners, but the quiet act of sharing what little there is. You see it in their eyes. Gratitude not spoken, but remembered. Trust not declared, but lived. Bonds forged not in triumph, but in hunger. There are nights when laughter fades, when silence grows heavy, rumors of enemy armies, whispers of mountains that break men's spirits, stories of deserts where the sun burns too hot to survive. Fear walks quietly among the campfires, settling on shoulders, sinking into eyes. But it is shared fear. No man carries it alone. Even in silence, there is comfort in knowing the man beside you feels the same. If you were Alexander, you would recognize that fear is not weakness. It is part of the road. It shapes the bonds of men, just as hunger and laughter do. History will remember your generals, your strategies, your victories. But if you were Alexander, you would know the truth. The empire is built on the backs of men whose names will never be spoken in history's halls. The man who carried an injured friend for miles. The boy who stood guard through rain while others slept. the cook who turned meager scraps into a meal, the builder who raised bridges under threat of arrows. These are the quiet heroes, not crowned, not celebrated, but essential. If you were Alexander, you would know that you are carried not by destiny alone, but by the footsteps of men too ordinary for songs. And yet, for all their closeness, you remain apart. Companionship surrounds you, but it does not belong entirely to you. You are king. Your men speak to you, but not as they speak to one another. Their jokes pause when you pass. Their laughter softens in your presence. If you were Alexander, you would feel the loneliness of command, surrounded, yet separate, bound to your men, yet also distant from them. You march together, but you walk alone. This loneliness is not bitterness, it is simply truth. To be king is to carry solitude, even among thousands. And so the march continues, step by step, day by day, through laughter and silence, hunger and sharing, fear and trust. The men who walk beside you are not perfect. They grumble, they complain, they question, but they march. And in their marching, they carry you, not as a figure above them, but as one among them. If you were Alexander, you would understand that the true empire lies not in lands conquered, but in bonds formed along the way. Bonds of bread, bonds of silence, bonds of laughter carried across endless roads. And these bonds, though history may not record them, are what make conquest possible at all. Thus you march, not alone, but with thousands, not with statues or myths, but with men whose sandals wear thin, whose laughter breaks silence, whose hands share bread in hunger. History calls it conquest, but if you were Alexander, you would know it as companionship. The men who walk beside you are the empire's true foundation, and in their steps, your destiny unfolds. If you were Alexander, you would know that conquest is not only about battles won, but about the spaces in between. The days when the horizon seems to stretch forever. The mornings when the road is empty, the air still, the silence broken only by the sound of your army moving as one. The march east is not sudden. It is not swift. It is long, deliberate, heavy. Step by step, the empire extends itself. Step by step, the weight of distance grows. It is not the victories that test you most. It is this, the slow passage of time, measured in footsteps, in breaths, in dust. Marching becomes its own kind of music, the sound of sandals striking earth in unison, the rattle of bronze, the creak of wood, the sigh of tired men, the occasional call of an officer, sharp but fading quickly into silence. Day after day, this rhythm repeats, until it ceases to feel like labor. It becomes part of the body itself, as natural as breathing. If you were Alexander, you would understand that this rhythm carries not only men, but dreams. For each man marches not only for conquest, but for hope, for reward, for honor, for the promise of return. The land changes slowly as you move eastward. Hills flatten into plains. Plains dissolve into scrubland. Rivers appear like silver threads across the earth, offering water, then vanish again into dryness. Each new land feels at once strange and familiar. Strange because it is not home. Familiar because it becomes part of the march, folded into the endless repetition of step after step. If you were Alexander, you would see the land not as a map, but as a sequence of roads, rivers, and resting places. You would learn its moods, the generosity of fertile valleys, the cruelty of deserts, the patience of mountains. The sun grows harsh as the army moves east. It presses down on shoulders, burns the skin, dries the lips. Shields grow hot to the touch. Armor becomes a burden. The men march anyway. Sweat runs, dust clings, tempers flare quietly. But still, they move. If you were Alexander, you would feel the sun as more than weather. It is a test, a measure of endurance. It asks, wordlessly, how far are you willing to carry your dream? On the march, time loses its shape. Days blend into each other. One sunrise looks much like the last. One campfire blurs into the next. If you were Alexander, you would find yourself asking, was that battle last year or last month? Did we cross that river yesterday or a lifetime ago? Time becomes circular. The march begins, the march continues, the march ends, only to begin again the next morning. And in this circle, men learn patience. They learn that conquest is not made of lightning, but of repetition. On long roads, words fall away. Men walk side by side in silence, not unfriendly, not cold, simply tired. Their silence becomes its own language. A nod replaces a sentence. A glance replaces a thought. A shared burden speaks louder than conversation. If you were Alexander, you would notice this silence as a presence in itself. It is not emptiness, but a kind of quiet companionship, shaped by the endless road. Each evening brings the same routine, the setting of camp, tents raised, fires lit, water fetched, bread divided. The camps blur into one another, but each night holds its own small moment. The smell of smoke mixing with dry air, the soft murmur of songs sung under breath, the relief of setting down burdens, if only for a few hours. If you were Alexander, you would feel the camp as both fragile and strong. Fragile in its impermanence, strong in its repetition. Not all who march can keep pace. Some grow weak, some stumble, some falter under the weight of heat, hunger, or fatigue. The column does not stop. It cannot. And yet, within it, small acts of mercy unfold. A soldier reaches out to steady another. A friend carries the shield of one too tired to lift it. If you were Alexander, you would know this truth. The march is not only endurance, but compassion. It is the small kindnesses that allow the army to move forward at all. What keeps men walking? Not bread, not pay alone. It is the dream that lies always just beyond the horizon. For some, the dream is simple: land, gold, reward. For others, it is glory, the thought of being remembered. For others still, it is the hope of returning home, of carrying stories to their children. If you were Alexander, you would know that this dream is the true fuel of the march. It is what keeps tired feet moving when the road stretches on without end. When you look back, you do not see glory. You see footprints, thousands upon thousands pressed into earth, soon to be erased by wind and rain. And yet, it is these footprints that make the empire. Each step is a thread woven into the fabric of distance. Each footprint carries the dream a little further east. If you were Alexander, you would understand. The empire is not only cities taken, but roads walked. It is not only banners raised, but sandals worn thin. Conquest is not sudden, it is slow. It is this, the march east, carried out day after day, step after step, until the horizon itself bends to you. The march east is not dramatic. It is not a tale of thunder or lightning. It is a tale of dust, of sweat, of silence, of repetition. And yet, in its slowness, it carries the weight of empires. If you were Alexander, you would know. Greatness does not arrive in sudden bursts, but in the patient rhythm of footsteps. And in the slow march east, destiny is carried forward, one quiet step at a time. If you were Alexander, you would learn to see a city not as walls and towers, but as a pause in the endless march. A place where men rest, where rivers cross, where roads converge. Some cities rise already built, with markets humming and temples standing tall. Others are drawn first on parchment, then on earth, their shapes traced in dust by your surveyors. But all cities, whether ancient or newborn, are only footprints. They mark where you have been, not where you will remain. To found a city is to leave a trace. You choose the place by river, by sea, by trade route. You order the first stones to be set, the lines of streets to be measured, the foundations of markets and walls. If you were Alexander, you would not lift the stones yourself, but you would stand nearby, watching, knowing that with each stone, the march becomes less fleeting. A settlement remains even after the army passes. It feels like permanence. And yet even stone is fragile. Cities can rise, and cities can crumble. The true permanence is not in the walls, but in the act of leaving them behind. In every city, life begins in the markets. The stalls filled with jars of oil, baskets of figs, fabrics dyed deep blue or pale red. The voices of sellers calling out, not in your tongue, but in their own. The smell of spices, the sound of animals, the chatter of buyers. If you were Alexander, you would walk through these markets not as conqueror, but as a listener. You would hear the hum of life continuing, indifferent to empire. The city breathes regardless of banners. Every city has its gods. Some raise stone altars. Some carve wooden idols. Some burn incense before shrines of clay. If you were Alexander, you would stand before these temples in quiet respect, not because they are yours, but because they are theirs. The prayers of others rise like smoke into the air, carrying with them hopes as deep as those of your own people. Conquest does not erase gods. It only adds new voices to the chorus of the sacred. The people of each city are not enemies or subjects. They are lives unfolding. Children chasing each other through narrow streets. Women carrying jars of water from wells. Old men sitting in doorways, watching the world pass. If you were Alexander, you would know that these are not stories that will be told in history. They are too ordinary, too quiet, and yet they are what make a city breathe. You pass through, and they remain. Your army marches on, but the people keep living, keep laughing, keep grieving. And so the city continues, like a footprint left behind in dust. You leave your name behind, often. Alexandria in Egypt, Alexandria in Arachosia, Alexandria in Margiana. Each time it is the same, a city named for you, built as a mark of your passage. It feels as though you are writing yourself onto the land itself. But if you were Alexander, you would know the truth. Even these cities are only temporary. The name endures, but even a name is only sound carried by wind. A city feels solid. Walls rising, gates closing, towers overlooking the plains. But stone crumbles, wood rots, fires consume. If you were Alexander, you would sense the fragility beneath the strength. You would understand that no city, however proud, can resist time. It is not conquest that erases cities, it is years. The slow wear of rain and wind, the silence that settles when people move on. Even the greatest cities will one day be only ruins, scattered stones in grass. When your army leaves, silence returns. The markets fall quiet, the streets empty, the gates close. The people look to one another, uncertain of what comes next. But life resumes. Bread is baked, water is drawn, children laugh again. If you were Alexander, you would realize your passing is dramatic only to history. To the city itself, it is only another season, another storm, another presence that comes and goes. The city endures not by resisting, but by continuing. For your soldiers, each city is more than walls and markets. It is memory. This was the place where we rested after the long march. This was where I tasted fruit I had never seen before. This was where I saw a temple carved into rock. The city becomes a marker in the long journey east, not for its wealth, but for its presence in memory. If you were Alexander, you would know that each city, no matter how small, becomes a chapter in the story of the march. And so cities, like men, are not permanent. They are footprints, visible for a time, then fading. If you were Alexander, you would understand that you are not building an empire of stone, you are leaving traces like steps pressed into dust. The cities are pauses in the march, marks of your passing. They are reminders that even greatness is temporary, that even permanence is fragile. And yet this does not diminish them, it makes them human. Cities feel eternal when you walk their streets. But if you were Alexander, you would know that even they are only moments, pauses in the march, markers of time, footprints left in the dust of history. Stone will crumble, names will fade, walls will fall. But the memory of passing through, of seeing markets, temples, and people will linger. For in the end, cities are not the empire. They are the footprints of the road, no more permanent than the men who built them, yet no less precious. If you were Alexander, you would know that there comes a point where the world itself begins to feel uncertain, where the lines on maps blur, where the stories told by guides grow hesitant, where even the land feels like it is testing you with silence. The march east has carried you far, through valleys, across rivers, over mountains. But now you step beyond what many once thought possible. Beyond Greece, beyond Persia, beyond the reach of stories your ancestors knew. You are not only marching an army, you are walking into myth. On maps, these regions are little more than blank parchment, wide spaces filled with little notes. Here be deserts, here be mountains, here be tribes unknown. If you were Alexander, you would understand that these empty spaces are not truly empty. They are homes to others, lands shaped by sun and storm, places where life continues far from the eyes of empires. But to your men, they are daunting. To march into a space without roads, without names, is to step into uncertainty itself. The known world feels solid. The unknown feels fragile. The mountains rise first, dark, vast, immovable. Their peaks hidden in clouds, their paths steep and treacherous. The air grows thin, the nights grow cold. Men stumble on rocky slopes, horses strain under the weight of packs. Progress slows to a crawl. If you were Alexander, you would feel the mountains not only as obstacles of stone, but as reminders. The world is not built for ease. It demands patience, endurance, humility. And yet, step by step, the army climbs. Then come the rivers, wide, rushing, relentless. Bridges must be built, rafts lashed together, men wading waist-deep against the current, supplies carried carefully, horses coaxed across trembling planks. The river resists. It pulls at legs, tugs at shields, swallows careless feet. If you were Alexander, you would know that rivers are not merely obstacles, but teachers. They remind you that all movement is negotiation, between force and flow, between persistence and surrender. The deserts stretch without mercy, sand underfoot, sun overhead, horizon wavering in the heat. Men thirst, lips crack, feet drag. Each step feels heavier than the last. The silence of the desert is immense. No birdsong, no rustle of leaves, only wind and the sound of sandals against sand. If you were Alexander, you would learn the true weight of distance here. Not in battles, not in sieges, but in the simple act of surviving one more day beneath the endless sky. Among the men, stories grow. Stories of lands where the sky meets the sea, of creatures with faces of dogs, of people who live in trees or in caves or beneath the earth. These are not truths, perhaps, but they are how men explain the unknown. The edges of the world are filled not only with distance, but with imagination. If you were Alexander, you would listen quietly, for even if the stories are not real, they reveal something deeper, the human need to make sense of mystery. There is a quiet fear that follows the army. What if the world truly has an edge? What if beyond the horizon lies not more land, but a drop into nothingness? This fear is not spoken loudly, but it lingers in glances, in hesitations, in the way men look at the vast unknown ahead. If you were Alexander, you would recognize this fear as part of all journeys. The fear that beyond the familiar, there may be nothing at all. The edges of the known world are not only outside, but inside. Each man carries his own boundary, the limit of his endurance, the point where hope falters, where fear overwhelms. If you were Alexander, you would know that to lead is not only to cross rivers and deserts, but to walk with men as they face their own edges. To remind them gently that their limit is not the end, that one more step is always possible. At the edges of the known world, the night sky feels vast beyond comprehension. Stars scatter like countless fires. The moon rises cold and pale. Silence stretches so deep that even breathing feels loud. Men lie awake, staring upward, realizing how small they are beneath the endless sky. If you were Alexander, You would also look upward and wonder. The world is larger than you can ever conquer, and in that realization there is both humility and awe. And so, the edges of the world are not endings, they are beginnings. Beyond each mountain, a valley. Beyond each desert, a river. Beyond each fear, another step. If you were Alexander, you would know that the known world is not fixed. It is always expanding, always unfolding, always being redrawn by those willing to walk further. The edge is not a wall, it is a door. At the edges of the known world, you confront more than distance. You confront silence, fear, imagination, the limits of endurance, the vastness of the sky. And if you were Alexander, you would learn this truth. The world has no true edges. It is as wide as the courage to walk forward. What feels like an ending is only the beginning of another road. If you were Alexander, you would know the silence that falls when two groups meet who do not share words. You would stand at the head of your column as strangers appear in the distance. They are not enemies, not yet, but neither are they friends. They carry weapons of shapes your men have never seen. They wear clothes woven in patterns unfamiliar, cut in forms that speak of different climates, different needs. Their eyes, when they look at you, are steady, but unreadable. The air feels heavy. The earth itself seems to pause, waiting to see what language will be spoken. To your men, language has always been the thread that ties them to the world. A word is not only sound, but a signal of belonging. Now, words fall useless. Shouted commands mean nothing. Explanations vanish into the air ungrasped. You discover that the absence of language feels like the absence of safety. Without words, even gestures seem sharp, easily mistaken. A lifted hand, greeting or threat. A step forward, trust or attack. If you were Alexander, you would feel the strange vulnerability of being unable to speak. The first language spoken is not sound, but movement. Hands are lifted slowly, palms shown open, fingers spread, weapons lowered just slightly, enough to suggest peace, but not enough to invite risk. A man kneels and draws in the dust. Circles, lines, shapes. His finger etches meaning into the earth, a silent attempt to create a bridge where voices cannot. Another responds, scratching his own marks. The ground becomes a tablet of exchange. If you were Alexander, you would see that the earth itself can be a translator. Objects become words. A soldier offers bread. Slowly, it is accepted. A stranger offers fruit in return. The act is simple, but it carries meaning deeper than speech. We are not enemies. We are sharers of food. A jug of water passed between hands. A small piece of metal shown, weighed, touched, admired. Each exchange says what mouths cannot. We live, we eat, we drink. We work with our hands just as you do. If you were Alexander, you would see that language begins not with sound, but with recognition. Days later, words begin to surface. Not whole conversations, but fragments. A sound repeated, imitated, recognized. The name of a river, the word for bread, the call of an animal in the hills. Men laugh softly at mispronunciations. They gesture, point, repeat. Language becomes play, a game of sounds tested and remembered. If you were Alexander, you would know that every word learned is a small victory, not conquest, but connection. Yet, misunderstandings still come. A gesture that means welcome in one land might mean insults in another. A word that sounds kind might echo like mockery. Tempers flare briefly. Hands tighten on spears. But then, slowly, calm returns. The men realize that mistakes are not war. They are part of learning. If you were Alexander, you would understand that patience is the truest form of diplomacy. One night a stranger sings. The language is incomprehensible, but the melody is clear. A rhythm that rises and falls like waves, a song carried by breath, by memory, by longing. Your men listen. Slowly, one begins to hum in answer. Two voices weave together, different but not discordant. The camp fills with sound that needs no translation. If you were Alexander, you would realize music is the oldest shared language. As days stretch into weeks, language deepens. Your men learn the names of mountains, rivers, valleys. The strangers learn words for armor, horse, spear. Each shared word feels like a stone laid in a bridge. Slowly, the gap narrows. The edges of the world feel less sharp, less foreign. If you were Alexander, you would know that naming is not just labeling. It is acknowledging. To learn the name of a river is to see it as alive, worthy of memory. The deepest lesson is not speaking, but listening. To hear a language you do not know is to hear the world differently. Its rhythms, its sounds, its hidden logic. You begin to realize that every language carries not just meaning, but a way of seeing. If you were Alexander, you would sit quietly, listening, letting the unknown words flow around you like water. For in listening, the world grows larger. And in the end, you realize something simple, that language is not only words, it is the offering of bread, the lowering of weapons, the sharing of water, the laughter around a fire, the silence of trust. If you were Alexander, you would understand that strangers are only strangers until you share a language. And language, in its truest sense, is any act that reminds us we are human together. At first, silence feels like distance, but then slowly, gestures, objects, sounds, songs, each becomes a bridge. If you were Alexander, you would learn that the language of strangers is not foreign. It is waiting, always beneath the surface. And that to walk east is not only to discover lands, but to discover ways of speaking and ways of listening that belong to all humankind. If you were Alexander, you would one day awaken to find the world wrapped in fog. The air is thick, the horizon gone. Shapes blur into pale outlines. Mountains become shadows. Rivers vanish into silence. The army marches slowly, footsteps muffled on damp ground. Even the sound of hooves seems swallowed by the mist. In such weather, the world feels uncertain. Distance vanishes. Direction wavers. The known dissolves into the unseen. Men whisper of losing the road. A wrong step could lead to cliffs, to marshes, to endless wandering. Maps mean little when landmarks are gone. Compass points feel abstract when even the sun is hidden. If you were Alexander, you would feel the weight of every choice. Each direction is a guess, each pause a test of patience. The fog becomes not only weather, but trial, a question asked of every heart. Can you walk forward when you cannot see? At night, lanterns are lit, small flames glowing in glass, swinging from poles carried by hands. They burn softly, golden against the pale gray. Each lantern lights only a few steps ahead, but together they form a line, a thread of warmth through the cold mist. If you were Alexander, you would see that lanterns do not banish fog. They do not reveal the whole road, but they give enough light for one more step, and sometimes that is all that is needed. Fog has a sound of its own, or rather the absence of sound. Birds grow quiet. Rivers murmur faintly as if from far away. Even the clink of armor is muted, swallowed by the damp air. Men speak less. Voices carry strangely, vanishing after only a few feet. If you were Alexander, you would feel the strange intimacy of such silence. Each sound becomes precious, each voice close. The world narrows, drawing people inward. In the fog, imagination awakens. Every shadow could be a figure. Every sound could be a step. The unknown becomes a canvas for fear. Some men whisper of spirits in the mist, others of hidden enemies waiting just beyond sight. The fog seems alive, filled with presence, though nothing stirs. If you were Alexander, you would know that fog teaches a lesson. Fear does not always come from what is seen, but from what cannot be seen. Sometimes the fog does not lift for days. The army halts, camps made in damp fields, men sitting idle with cloaks pulled tight. Food is shared quietly. Fires burn low, their smoke vanishing into white air. Time itself feels slowed, each hour stretched long by waiting. If you were Alexander, you would understand that conquest is not only battle. It is also endurance. It is the patience to wait when the road is hidden, to rest when progress is impossible. The lantern becomes more than flame. It becomes symbol. For the men it means safety. For the weary it means guidance. For the fearful it means hope. If you were Alexander, you would see in the lantern the truth of leadership itself. Not to clear all fog, but to hold a light steady enough that others can keep walking. But there are lanterns that do not burn with oil. They burn in memory, of home, of family, of villages far behind. They burn in faith, in gods, in destiny, in the belief that steps have meaning. They burn in companionship, the presence of comrades beside you in the mist. If you were Alexander, you would know that every man carries his own lantern within. And it is those inner flames that keep an army moving forward when the world itself is hidden. One morning, as the sun rises, the fog begins to thin. Slowly, outlines sharpen, trees take shape, hills emerge. The river gleams faintly in the distance. The world returns, not suddenly, but gently, as if unveiled. The men stir. Voices rising again, steps quickening. Relief spreads like warmth. If you were Alexander, you would see that fog never lasts forever. And when it lifts, the world feels sharper, more vivid, more alive than before. The fog leaves a memory. It teaches that not all journeys are made with clarity, that sometimes you walk without seeing far, that sometimes light is small and progress slow. But still, step by step, you move. If you were Alexander, you would carry this truth forward. The world is not always clear. But even in fog, lanterns can guide. Fog is not only weather. It is a metaphor for uncertainty, for doubt, for the hidden parts of life. If you were Alexander, you would know that to live is to walk often in fog. But the lanterns, whether flames in glass or memories or friendships, are what make the road possible. And so, even when the world hides itself, the journey continues. If you were Alexander, you would know that battle ends not with the last blow, but with silence. The clamor fades, the shouting dims, the dust settles over broken ground. Spears rest against shields. Men lean on their knees, breathing heavily. The victory is yours. The enemy has fled or yielded. But in that stillness, the true burden begins. Victory is counted not only in banners raised, but in the faces left behind. Your men step among the fallen, some friend, some foe. Each face bears its own story. A farm left untended, a child waiting at home, a dream that will not be carried forward. The world calls it triumph. But you see that triumph is built of endings. If you were Alexander, you would feel the paradox. To win is to lose something also. The living do not feel like victors. They feel weary, emptied. Their arms ache, their throats burn, their eyes grow heavy with exhaustion. Some sit in silence, staring into nothing. Others weep quietly. If you were Alexander, you would know that victory rarely feels glorious in the moment. It feels heavy, draining, a weight pressing on the body and the heart. For you, the burden is heavier still. It was your decision to march here, your orders that led men into battle, your vision that carried them to this place. And now, their lives, the ones lost and the ones spared, rest on your shoulders. If you were Alexander, you would feel not only the pride of victory, but the guilt of its cost. For to lead is to bear the weight of choice, even when choice means loss. After battle, spoils are gathered, weapons, armor, food, treasures left behind. To some men, these are prizes. To others, they are reminders that what once belonged to another now belongs to them, because another man has fallen. If you were Alexander, you would watch your men divide spoils with quiet eyes, knowing that wealth cannot erase the memory of struggle. Cities greet you with applause, with songs, with garlands of flowers. They call you conqueror, savior, hero. They praise your name, lift their voices, lay gifts at your feet. But if you were Alexander, you would hear beneath the cheers another sound. The silence of those who do not cheer, the grief of those who have lost, the quiet eyes that watch from shadows, mourning what cannot be returned. Victory is never celebrated by all. The higher you rise, the fewer walk beside you. Your generals praise you, your soldiers honor you, your name spreads far. Yet in the quiet of night, you realize few truly understand. The burden of victory is that it sets you apart. Others see only glory, only you feel the weight behind it. If you were Alexander, you would know that triumph is a lonely crown. For your men, peace is harder than war. When fighting ends, the stillness feels strange. Muscles long used to motion twitch with unease. Voices grow restless. Some seek distraction in drink, in games, in quarrels. Victory brings safety, but also idleness. And idleness carries its own dangers. If you were Alexander, you would see that battle is easier to lead than peace. For peace requires patience, balance, and the steady hand of restraint. Each man carries memory of the field, the sound of clash, the cry of pain, the image of a friend falling. These memories return in sleep, in silence, in moments of pause. Victory cannot erase them. They follow, as shadows do, carried in the mind. If you were Alexander, you would understand that men return from war not unchanged, but altered, and that the burden of victory is not only yours, but theirs also. And yet, even after victory, the road does not end. Another march awaits, another city, another field, another battle. The weight of one victory is not lifted before the next begins. If you were Alexander, you would know that victory is never final. It is only a pause before the next struggle. And in this endless cycle, the burden grows heavier. And so you learn, victory is not joy. It is responsibility. It is weight. It is cost. If you were Alexander, you would carry this truth always, that the burden of victory is not in the moment of triumph, but in the days that follow. The burden of victory is not the clash of swords, but the silence after. It is not the spoils, but the memories. It is not the cheer, but the quiet grief. If you were Alexander, you would know that triumph carries weight as heavy as defeat, and that to lead is not only to win battles, but to bear the burden of what victory truly means. If you were Alexander, you would know that the hardest nights are not those before battle, but those after. In the nights before, there is focus, sharpened blades, steady plans, hearts braced for dawn. But in the nights after, silence spreads. The sounds of war fade. The camp is quiet. And in that quiet, dreams return. Dreams are not always gentle. Some come sharp and fractured, filled with the cries of battle, the faces of the fallen, the weight of choice. Others are stranger still, visions of lands unseen, of rivers beyond maps, of skies that seem endless. If you were Alexander, you would know the restlessness of such dreams. They do not let you stay. They urge you onward, whispering of places yet to be found, victories yet to be won. Your men, too, dream restlessly. Some dream of home, of olive groves, of the laughter of children, of wives waiting by doors. Their hearts ache with distance. Others dream of fear, of the moments they nearly fell, of the sound of arrows, of eyes closing for the last time. They wake sweating, gasping, staring into darkness. And still others dream of the road, of what lies ahead, of promises yet unkept, of treasures not yet found. If you were Alexander, you would know that victory does not bring peace to the mind. Dreams stir desire, desire for rest, desire for more, desire for something beyond what has already been gained. Victory does not still the hunger, it deepens it. For once the known is conquered, the unknown calls louder. If you were Alexander, you would lie awake at night and feel that call. Not contentment, but yearning, a restlessness that cannot be silenced. Some dreams are filled with visions of future battles, cities waiting to be taken, rivers crossed, armies scattered before your advance. The dream paints the world as endless battlefield, each horizon another prize. These dreams burn bright, stirring the blood, but they also carry weight, for they demand more than the body can endure. If you were Alexander, you would know the danger of such dreams. They make rest impossible. Other dreams are quieter. They are filled with seas no one has sailed, mountains no one has crossed, stars no one has mapped. They whisper not of conquest, but of discovery. These dreams do not roar, they murmur, yet their call is stronger than any trumpet. If you were Alexander, you would feel that pull, not toward war, but toward mystery, the dream of touching the edges of the world. Restless dreams bring restless waking. Some nights you cannot sleep at all. You rise, walk the camp in silence, hear the soft breathing of men, the occasional whinny of a horse. The night feels endless. Time stretches thin, each hour a slow drip of water. If you were Alexander, you would know that insomnia is its own battlefield, a struggle not against enemies, but against the self. Restless leaders make restless armies. Men begin to ask, where next? When will we move? What lies beyond this city, this river, this mountain? Their dreams mirror your own, not content to stay, eager for more, uneasy with stillness. If you were Alexander, you would see how restlessness spreads like fire. It gives energy, but it also consumes peace. Dreams also bring shadows, the faces of the lost, the mistakes made, the weight of choices past. You see again the men who fell. You hear again the cries of mothers, the silence of those left behind. These shadows walk with you, even in sleep. If you were Alexander, you would understand. Victory does not erase the past. It only layers new memories upon old ones. The shadows always return, and so, night after night, dreams return. Some fiery, some mournful, some strange, some beautiful. But all carry the same truth: rest is fleeting. The mind does not sleep easily when destiny whispers. If you were Alexander, you would know that restless dreams are not a curse. They are the sign of a life always reaching beyond. They are what keep you moving forward, and what never lets you truly rest. The return of restless dreams is the return of the road itself. For the conqueror, sleep is never deep. For the restless, peace is never lasting. For the dreamer, the world is never complete. If you were Alexander, you would know that dreams, both bright and dark, are what bind you to the journey, and that restlessness itself is the truest companion of all. If you were Alexander, you would know that home never leaves you. Even as you cross mountains, even as you stand before foreign cities, even as new horizons unfold, home follows. It lingers like a shadow, quiet but unbroken. You do not see it always, but when the nights grow long or the fires burn low, you feel it, like the faintest trace of a scent, the faintest whisper of a voice. Home is far, yet it is never gone. For the men who walk beside you, home is not a palace. It is a small courtyard shaded by olive trees, a mother's voice calling in the evening, the rough grain of wood doors, the warm dust of familiar roads. Some speak of wives and children, others of vineyards, fields, rivers they fished as boys. In every voice there is both warmth and ache. If you were Alexander, you would hear these stories by the fire, and you would know that though you carry the dream of empire, your soldiers carry the shadow of home. Distance does strange things. The longer you are away, the more the details blur. Faces soften, voices fade, colors dim. Yet the feelings grow stronger. The further you go, the more vivid the ache becomes. If you were Alexander, you would notice how distance sharpens longing. How men who once left their homes with eagerness now whisper of them, as if speaking of sacred places. Distance turns ordinary streets into legends. It turns ordinary houses into shrines. Home comes most often in dreams. A soldier stirs in his sleep, smiling faintly as he hears the echo of his child's laughter. Another whispers a name as though someone stands at his side. And when morning comes, those dreams linger like mist. If you were Alexander, you would walk through the camp at dawn and feel the weight of dreams unspoken. The shadow of home lies heavy on every man. And you, even you, are not free from the shadow. You remember the palace in Pella, the voice of your mother, the lessons of your youth, the shadow of your father's name. You remember the hills where you trained, the companions of childhood, the first maps you studied, the first roads you walked. These memories surface when you least expect them, in the silence of the night, in the pause before dawn, in the glance of a soldier who reminds you of someone left behind. If you were Alexander, you would know that the conqueror is also the son who once stood in a familiar courtyard, looking out at the world with wonder. But the shadow of home is not only comfort, it is also a burden. For each step eastward is a step away. Each conquest, each horizon, carries you further from the soil where you began. If you were Alexander, you would know the weight of this truth, that the dream of empire is bought with the slow fading of home. In quiet moments, the men begin to ask, "When will we return?" Not loudly, not in defiance, but softly, as though asking themselves. Some wonder if their children still remember them. Some wonder if their homes still stand as they left them. The question lingers in the air, unspoken, yet heavy. If you were Alexander, you would feel it. You would see it in their eyes, hear it in their silence. The shadow of home is not only behind them, it is within them. But the truth, though few will admit it, is that home has already changed. By the time you return, the seasons will have shifted, the children will have grown, the streets will no longer be as you remember. If you were Alexander, you would know. The home you left behind is no longer the home that waits. What you carry is a shadow, not the place itself. And perhaps that is why men grow quiet when they speak of return. They know that even if they walk back, what they find will not be what they remember. As leader, you carry not only your own shadow of home, but that of thousands. Every soldier's ache becomes part of your burden. Every longing glance westward is another reminder of the distance you have created. If you were Alexander, you would know that conquest is not only battles and maps. It is also the silent weight of homes left waiting. It follows in dreams, in silence, in stories told by the fire. It cannot be outrun, for it is part of every man, part of you as well. You would know that the shadow of home is the quiet price of the road. It is what makes the victories heavy, what makes the triumphs bittersweet. It is what reminds you, even at the edge of the world, that you began somewhere, and that somewhere still waits. even if it waits only in memory. If you were Alexander, you would learn that home is never lost, but it is never the same. It walks with you as shadow. It whispers in dreams. It waits in silence. And even as you stand before horizons unknown, you carry that shadow always. If you were Alexander, you would know that every road, no matter how far, leads to a horizon. You have followed many, through valleys, over mountains, across rivers, into cities that once seemed unassailable. Yet still, the horizon remains. It never ends. No matter how far you walk, there is always another line of light waiting at the edge of vision. It is humbling. It is endless. It is the quiet reminder that even kings do not reach the end of the world. Your men feel it too. The years weigh heavy on their shoulders. Their armor is worn, their sandals patched, their voices quieter now. And yet they march, step after step, as though pulled forward by something larger than themselves. If you were Alexander, you would know this truth. No army walks forever. Every march bends toward rest. Every journey bends toward silence. The mind may still hunger for horizons, but the body remembers its limits. Wounds that once healed quickly now ache in the cold. Nights once filled with energy now leave you weary at dawn. Even kings cannot outrun time. Even conquerors cannot silence the body's quiet reminder. All roads, even yours, must end. If you were Alexander, you would feel this truth in your bones, though you might not yet speak it aloud. In the stillness of night, you begin to look back. Not at battles, not at victories, not at maps spread across tables, but at the smaller things, the laughter of friends long gone, the sound of a river crossed, the first glimpse of a foreign shore. You realize that empire is built not only on conquest, but on these quiet moments, moments that pass unnoticed yet linger longest. If you were Alexander, you would know that reflection is another kind of horizon, one that opens not before you, but within you. Your men, too, reflect. Around the fires, their stories have changed. Once they spoke of spoils, of victories, of cities burning. Now they speak of families, of the soil they left, of the wish to sit beneath familiar trees once more. If you were Alexander, you would listen. You would know that even as you chase horizons, they dream of stillness. And you would understand. The longing for home is also a horizon. And yet beyond rest, beyond longing, lies another thought. What remains? What will endure when the marches end, when the banners are lowered, when your voice falls silent? If you were Alexander, you would know that legacy is not in monuments alone, nor in maps redrawn. It is in memory, the way your men will speak of you, the way stories will echo after you are gone. Legacy is not something you carry. It is something others carry after you. In the closing chapters of a journey, companions matter most. Those who remain at your side, not for spoils, not for glory, but for loyalty, become more precious than any conquest. If you were Alexander, you would feel the bond of these last companions more deeply than any victory. You would see that it is not empire, but fellowship that keeps the road bearable. And so the last horizon waits. It is not a mountain to climb, not a city to take, not a sea to cross. It is the horizon of silence, of return. of rest. Every man walks toward it, some quickly, some slowly, some unwilling, some at peace. If you were Alexander, you would know that even you too are bound to this horizon, for no road, not even yours, escapes it. At the edge of the last horizon, what remains? Not banners, not armor, not the roar of battle. What remains is quieter. The memory of a hand clasped, the echo of laughter shared, the way the dawn once broke over a distant sea. If you were Alexander, you would understand. The true measure of life is not how far you walked, but how deeply you were remembered. And so the journey closes. The horizons you chased lie behind you. The last horizon lies ahead. But the deepest horizon is within, the place where dreams and memory meet, where silence carries its own kind of peace. If you were Alexander, you would know this, that the world itself is endless, but a life is not. And that is why it is precious. If you were Alexander, you would walk until the last horizon called. You would carry the weight of victories, the ache of distance, the restlessness of dreams. You would know that no empire lasts forever, but that the echo of a single life can stretch beyond maps, beyond time. And when the road finally ends, you would step quietly into that horizon, not as a conqueror, not as a king, but simply as a man who walked far, who dreamed deeply, and who, in the end, came home to silence. At last, the journey comes to its close. The roads have been walked, the battles remembered, the horizons reached, and now silence waits, not as an end, but as a gentle rest. If you were Alexander, you would know that no empire is eternal, and no crown is forever. But every step, every memory, every dream leaves an echo, and echoes live on. Tonight, let that echo settle softly within you. Let the weight of history grow quiet, and let the road of thought rest. For even conquerors must sleep, and even restless hearts must find stillness. And so, we end here, at the edge of the last horizon, where story becomes silence. Good night.